She asked for help in the rain to buy baby formula, but the millionaire saw her struggle and offered kindness instead. "Hello, my dear family." The rain fell steadily in Seattle, making the streets look empty. Each drop reminded Gary Welch of the tears he had cried for 40 long days. It had been 40 days since the phone call that turned his life upside down. 40 days since Sarah's laughter had filled their home. 40 days since he last felt their unborn son, Gabriel, kick against his hand through Sarah's belly. Gary pulled his coat a little tighter around his shoulders, though no fancy fabric could warm the chill in his heart. The rain soaked through his shoes, but he welcomed the discomfort. Physical pain felt easier to deal with than the emotional hurt that threatened to swallow him whole. At 35, Gary led a successful tech company. He was one of Seattle's youngest billionaires, having changed cloud computing for the better. He had everything: success, wealth, respect, and most importantly, Sarah. Beautiful and caring Sarah, with her shining hair and bright eyes, had shown him that love at first sight was real when she bumped into him at a coffee shop years ago, her nursing book spilling to the floor as she rushed on to her next task. But wealth meant nothing now when he couldn't bring back the ones he loved. Success felt empty without anyone to share it with, and love felt like a burden when it left such a void. Gary walked through the streets he had known well since the funeral. He couldn't stand to be at home, surrounded by the baby things they had picked out together. Everything there reminded him of what would never be. The rain fell harder, hitting the pavement like nature's sadness. He welcomed it, tilting his head to the sky as it washed over him. Maybe if he stood there long enough, the rain would wash him away too, and the ache inside would finally end. Just then, he heard a soft sound, a gentle tune that seemed to wrap around his heart. Gary stopped and turned towards the source. There, sheltered under a broken awning, sat a woman. She had rich, dark skin that glowed even in the dim light, and raindrops sparkled on her cheeks. Her hair was pulled back, and her eyes held a deep brown filled with a pain he recognized in himself. But it wasn't her beauty that caught his attention. It was what she cradled in her arms, two identical twins, around 10 months old, wrapped in thin blankets that did little to keep them dry. The woman, looking no older than 28, tried to shield them with her own body and sang a lullaby in Spanish. Her voice was sweet and full of sadness, reaching into his heart. As a few people hurried by without stopping, she pleaded softly, "Please, I just need enough for formula. My babies." Her English had a musical flow to it. Without thinking, Gary found himself standing in front of her, close enough to see the tiredness in her face and the way her hands trembled as she held her children. Their eyes met, and Gary felt a change in the air. While her pain stemmed from hardship, it resonated with his own grief. In that moment, looking into her beautiful eyes, he felt something he hadn't felt in 40 days' hope. "Ma'am," he said gently, crouching down to her level. The rain soaked his pants, but it didn't matter. "What are their names?" She blinked in surprise, not expecting a question. "Miguel and Marcus," she whispered, adjusting the blankets around the sleeping twins. "They're beautiful," Gary said, meaning every word. The babies were lovely, with their mother's rich skin tone and sweet features. "Where's their father?" A look of pain crossed her face. "Gone. When he found out they weren't his biological children, he left 3 weeks ago, taking everything. I've been in shelters, but they're full now." Her voice faltered, and she pressed her lips together, fighting tears. Gary's heart broke for her. Here was a woman who had been left behind and was now caring for 2 babies on her own. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. "Nora," she replied softly. "Nora Niola. Nora." Gary felt her name on his tongue, finding it sweet. "I'm Gary. Gary Welch." He noticed recognition in her eyes. His name was known in Seattle, but she did not treat him differently. She just kept looking at him, those incredible eyes waiting. Gary's mind raced, and he felt something unusual forming inside him, a mix of grief and loneliness along with a hint of destiny. Sarah believed strongly in signs, in the universe guiding people to the places they needed to be. Maybe she had sent him exactly what he needed most. "Nora," Gary said, feeling stronger now. I know this sounds strange, but I lost my wife and unborn son 40 days ago, and I've been walking these streets every night, feeling more lost each time. I see you here, taking care of your boys with all your heart, protecting them when you have so little. And I see what I lost, what I still want more than anything in this world. The rain continued to fall around them, creating a barrier that seemed to separate them from everything else. In that moment, it was just Gary, Nora, and the two sleeping babies who symbolized everything he had dreamed of. I have more money than I could use in a lifetime, Gary continued, his words coming out quickly now. I have a home that's too big and too empty. I have love that has nowhere to go. And you have these lovely children who deserve all the good things in life. Gary reached into his pocket and took out a ring. It was not Sarah's wedding ring, which he had buried with her, but his own simple platinum band that he had worn for 2 years. Without thinking too much, without worrying about the strange situation he found himself in, Gary, a wealthy businessman and grieving husband, knelt in the rain before this beautiful stranger and her children. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice shaking with emotion. "Let me love you. Let me love them. Let me be the father they need and the husband you deserve. Let me give you everything you need, and let me find a reason to live again." Nora stared at him, her mouth slightly open, rain mixing with tears on her cheeks. One of the babies, Miguel or Marcus, Gary couldn't tell which, stirred in her arms, making a soft sound that touched Gary's heart. "You don't know me," Nora whispered, but her voice was filled with wonder rather than rejection. "I know enough," Gary said firmly. "I know you'd rather sit in the rain than let your children go hungry. I know you sing to them in Spanish to calm them. I know you have faced hard times and yet you keep going. I see you have the strongest, most beautiful heart." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And I know that 40 days ago, I felt like giving up. But looking at you, at them, I remember what it feels like to want to live." Tears fell freely down Nora's cheeks, her eyes searching his face. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you want this? Want us?" Gary's own tears mingled with the rain. "Because the universe, or maybe Sarah herself, brought you here at this moment when I needed you the most. Because those babies deserve a father who will love them unconditionally, and I have so much love with nowhere to go. Maybe together we can save each other." Thunder rumbled overhead, and one of the babies woke up, starting to fuss. Nora instinctively began to rock him, her eyes never leaving Gary's face. "I don't have anything to offer you," she said quietly. "No money, no family, just these 2 babies." "They're perfect," Gary interrupted firmly. "You are perfect. You don't need to offer me anything except the chance to love you all." Nora looked down at her sons, and then back at Gary, still kneeling in the rain with the ring in his hand. "Okay," she whispered so softly he almost didn't hear. "Okay." "Yes," she said stronger now, meeting his eyes with a bravery that took his breath away. "Yes, Gary Welch, I'll marry you." Gary's heart filled with joy and relief. He slipped the ring onto Nora's finger. It was too big, but it would work for now. Then he stood and gathered her and the babies into his arms, all of them soaked and crying and laughing at the same time. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, holding his new family close. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving me hope again." As Gary helped Nora to her feet, supporting her and the babies, he felt a change inside his chest. The heaviness that had been there for 40 days began to lift, and beneath it, he felt the first warm flutter of what might become happiness again. They walked through the rain together toward Gary's car, heading home, toward a future none of them could have imagined an hour earlier. And if Gary glanced up at the sky and whispered a quiet thank you to Sarah, that was between him and the rain. Chapter 2. The Yes That Saved 2 Souls. The elevator rose to Gary's penthouse in thoughtful silence, broken only by the gentle breathing of the sleeping babies and the quiet drip of rainwater from their wet clothes. Nora pressed herself against the back wall of the elevator. With Miguel and Marcus snuggled in her arms, she struggled to understand the evening's unexpected turn. Just an hour earlier, she had been homeless and desperate. Now, she wore a stranger's wedding ring and rode toward one of Seattle's nicest apartments. Gary stood across from her, his stormy gray eyes focused intently on her face. Even soaking wet, he looked strikingly handsome, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled when wet and a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention. They reflected a pain so deep that it matched her own. And beneath that sorrow was a kind of respect as he watched her with her sons. "Are you having second thoughts?" Gary asked softly as they reached the 40th floor. Nora thought carefully about his question. Had she made a mistake by agreeing to marry a complete stranger? Maybe, she thought. But something about Gary felt reassuring in a way nothing had since Jerome had left 3 weeks before, taking everything she had. "No," she said quietly, surprising herself with her certainty. "Are you?" Gary smiled softly, his whole face lighting up. For a moment, the worries faded away. The elevator opened into Gary's penthouse, and Nora gasped. She had seen luxury apartments in movies, but this was even more than she could have imagined. Tall windows showed a stunning view of Seattle, and the room was decorated in warm grays and blues that felt both rich and welcoming. Yet, despite the beautiful setup, it felt empty, like a museum rather than a home. There were no personal touches or photographs, nothing that made it feel lived in. "Welcome home," Gary said, his voice slightly catching on the last word. Home. When was the last time Nora felt she had a real home? Her grandmother's small apartment in Los Angeles had been home until cancer took her when Nora was 22. The apartment she had shared with Jerome had never felt like home. It had always been his place for her to stay. But the way Gary said the word felt like a gift, making her chest tighten with emotion. Marcus stirred in her arms, starting to fuss with the cry that meant they needed to eat soon. Miguel followed shortly after. Their needs were perfectly in sync, as always. "They're hungry," Nora said, feeling embarrassed. "I don't have any formula left." "That's okay," Gary said quickly. "What kind do they usually drink? I'll have someone bring it right up." Nora told him the brand, watching in amazement as Gary made a phone call that would have taken her hours. In just 20 minutes, his building's concierge delivered not just formula, but also diapers, baby food, bottles, and a whole bunch of baby supplies. "I wasn't sure what size diapers to get," Gary explained, looking a bit shy. "So I got several different kinds." Nora stared at the pile of supplies that represented more money than she'd had in a long time. "Gary, this is too much. I can't accept all this." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, moving closer to her. "This is what family does. We take care of each other." Family? The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and hope. "Here, let me help," Gary said, reaching for Miguel. "Which one is which?" "Miguel has a small birthmark on his left temple," Nora said, carefully passing her son to Gary's arms. Marcus was a little bigger and had a small scar on his chin from when he fell off the couch last month. Gary held Miguel gently in his large hands. "Hello, Miguel," he said softly in Spanish, speaking it slowly and carefully. "I'm your dad." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "You speak Spanish?" she asked, surprised. "Just a bit," Gary admitted, rocking Miguel instinctively as the baby fussed. "I grew up in San Diego. My housekeeper, Maria, taught me when I was young. I might be a little rusty." Nora smiled softly, watching this strong man comfort her son. A feeling inside her began to stir, something she thought was long gone. They moved into Gary's big kitchen, working together to get bottles ready as if they had done it many times before. Gary held both babies while Nora prepared the formula, his arms managing their weight easily. When Miguel cried louder, Gary started humming a lullaby, the same one Nora had sung during the rain. "How did you know that song?" Nora asked. "My wife used to hum it," Gary replied quietly, looking distant. "Sarah was a pediatric nurse. She said that all babies like that tune, no matter where they came from. It mimics a heartbeat." Instead of feeling awkward, Nora felt drawn to this woman she'd never met. Sarah had loved Gary, and her presence felt warm in the room. "Tell me about her," Nora said as they settled on Gary's large couch, each feeding a baby. Gary's face softened with mixed emotions. "She was full of light," he said. "She couldn't stand to see children in pain. We met when she rushed into me at a coffee shop late for her shift. She knocked us both down." Nora smiled, imagining it. "Love at first sight," she said. "The moment I saw her eyes," Gary confirmed. "I knew I would marry her even before I knew her name." He chuckled sadly. "She said I was either very romantic or a bit crazy." "Maybe both," Nora suggested gently. Gary's laugh was soft and filled with sadness. "She'd have liked you," he said, looking into Nora's eyes. "She always believed that the strongest people kept loving, even when hurt. She would see that strength in you right away." They enjoyed a comfortable moment of silence, focusing on the babies as rain fell against the windows. Nora studied Gary's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and how tenderly he looked at Miguel. This man had just asked her to marry him, yet he felt so real and genuine. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "You could have anyone. Why did you ask me to be your wife?" Gary was quiet for a moment, looking at Marcus, who was drinking his bottle intently. Finally, he spoke, his voice honest. "Because when I saw you tonight, I saw everything I had lost," he said softly. "Not just Sarah and Gabriel, but the dream of family, a home filled with love, and little voices calling me Dad." He paused, shifting Marcus to his shoulder easily while continuing. "Sarah and I had talked about adopting one day. She believed that love was about choice, not biology." He looked straight at her. "When I saw you protecting Miguel and Marcus, willing to give everything for them, I knew you understood that love." Tears filled Nora's eyes. "They're not really my children," she admitted quietly. "I was with Jerome when his ex left them on his doorstep. She had been using drugs while pregnant. Jerome wanted to give them away, but I couldn't let that happen." "You became their mother the moment you chose them," Gary said firmly. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about love." Marcus fell asleep against Gary's shoulder, and Miguel was sleepy in Nora's arms. Gary moved to look out at the city lights. "I haven't felt peace in a long time," he said softly. "I haven't slept or eaten properly since everything happened. But being here with you and the boys, it's the first time I feel okay." Nora stepped closer, feeling his warmth. "I know that feeling," she said softly. "When Jerome left, I lost everything, even my self-worth. He made me feel like I was nothing." Gary turned to her, his eyes full of protection. "He was wrong," he said firmly. "You are strong. You are brave. You care deeply for these boys as if they were your own." Nora leaned into his hand, feeling tears fall. When was the last time someone respected her like this? "I'm scared," she whispered. "This feels so fast. What if we make a terrible mistake?" "Then we will figure it out together," Gary replied. "But you must understand this isn't about charity. I'm being honest about what I need. I want a family and someone to love. You're not taking anything away from me. You're giving me hope." At that moment, Miguel made a soft sound in his sleep, and both Gary and Nora looked down at him with tenderness. "We should put them to bed," Nora suggested. "I had Maria prepare the guest room," Gary said. "There are cribs and everything you'll need, but I want you to know, there are no expectations. We can take our time. If you need space, we can have separate rooms while we figure things out." As Nora looked at this wonderful man holding her son, she felt something shift in her heart. Fear was still there, but something stronger was rising: hope, gratitude, and the beginnings of what might blossom into love. "What if I don't want separate lives?" she asked quietly. Gary's breath caught. "What do you want?" "I want to give this a try," Nora said, her voice steady. "I want to see if we can create something real together. Not just for them," she nodded towards the sleeping babies, "but for us." Gary's smile lit up his whole face. "I'd like that too." They walked toward the guest room, but at the door, Gary paused. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "Tomorrow I want to make everything official. Legal adoption papers for the boys, and if you're okay with it, a small wedding ceremony. Just us and whoever you want there. I want Miguel and Marcus to have my name and protection, and I want you to be my wife in every way that counts." Nora's heart raced. "Gary, think about it," he said gently. "But no, I've never been more sure about anything. You three are my family now, and that won't change with or without papers. But I want everyone to know you belong with me." As they settled the babies into their cribs, which Gary had arranged to have brought and set up in just a few hours, Nora watched her soon-to-be husband tuck blankets around the tiny sleeping forms with great care. "Buenas noches," Gary whispered in gentle Spanish. "Sweet dreams." And for the first time in weeks, Nora believed they might be true. Chapter 3. Building Our Kingdom. The morning sun shone through the tall windows, showing that Nora was not dreaming. The sound of a deep voice softly singing in Spanish from the kitchen confirmed it, occasionally mispronouncing some words but filled with warmth. She had slept better than she had in months, even in an unfamiliar bed and place. For the first time since Jerome had left her, she felt safe enough to rest, knowing Miguel and Marcus were warm and cared for in the next room. Nora put on the soft robe Gary had left for her and walked towards the kitchen, following the sound of his voice and the delicious smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes. She found him at the stove in jeans and a gray t-shirt, flipping pancakes with one hand while holding Miguel in the other. Marcus was in a high chair, happily chewing on a biscuit. "Good morning," Gary said, turning to smile at her, and Nora's heart skipped a beat. In the morning light, he looked even more handsome than before. "I hope you don't mind that I got them up. They were starting to fuss, and I thought you could sleep a bit more." "You made breakfast?" Nora asked, trying to take in the scene, as Gary had clearly gone shopping for high chairs and baby food. "Maria helped," Gary said, pointing to an older woman setting the table with nice dishes. "Nora, this is Maria Santos. She has been taking care of me for 10 years, and she'll help us with the boys if you're okay with that." Maria approached with a warm smile and hugged Nora. "Welcome. Gary told me everything. These boys are beautiful, and you are exactly what this household has needed." Nora felt tears in her eyes from Maria's kind words. "Thank you," she said softly. "Maria has 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren," Gary explained, expertly transferring Miguel when he began to wiggle. "She knows more about babies than both of us combined." Maria gently poked Gary's arm. "He is a natural. I watched him with the boys this morning, and finally, he remembers how to smile." Gary's cheeks turned a bit red, and Nora found it charming. Here was one of the most important men in Seattle, looking shy because someone praised his care of the babies. "They're easy to love," Gary said simply, looking into Nora's eyes over Miguel's head. Breakfast felt surprisingly normal, even though they ate off nice dishes. Gary had gathered baby foods, and he and Nora took turns feeding the twins while Maria kept their plates full of the lightest pancakes Nora had ever tasted. "So," Gary said as Marcus eagerly grabbed his spoon, getting more food on his face than in his mouth, "I've cleared my schedule for today. If you're still willing, I'd like to go to the courthouse this morning to start the adoption papers and maybe—" He paused, looking unsure. "Get married if you still want to." Nora looked for any signs that he was unsure, but instead, she saw hope and a hint of fear that she might say no. "I haven't changed my mind," she replied quietly. "But Gary, are you really sure? Because once we do this and you adopt them, they'll be your sons forever. Even if things don't work out between us, they'd still be your responsibility." Gary set his coffee down and took her hand. "Nora, I want you to know something. When I held Miguel and Marcus, when I fed them and rocked them, I felt something I thought was lost. I felt like a father, not like I was pretending or doing someone a favor. It felt right." He paused, gently stroking her knuckles. "These boys aren't just my responsibility. They are my sons, and you will not just be someone I married out of pity. You will be my wife, the mother of my children, and the love of my life if you'll let me earn that." Nora's heart raced. "The love of your life, Gary. We barely know each other." "I know enough," Gary said firmly. "I know you sing to them in Spanish when they're scared. I know you'd rather go hungry than let them miss a meal. I know you have the most beautiful laugh I've ever heard. Yes, I heard you laugh when Marcus spilled on Maria's apron, and I know that when you really smile, it lights up your whole face." "That's not love," Nora said softly. "That's just attraction." "Maybe," Gary agreed, "but it can be the base of love, can't it? I loved Sarah completely. I know the difference between what I felt for her and what I feel for you." "What's the difference?" Nora asked. Gary was quiet for a moment, his eyes focused on something far away. "With Sarah, love grew slowly. We were friends first. It was safe and built on shared dreams. But with you, it's quick, powerful, and overwhelming. When I look at you, I don't just want to love you. I need to. It feels like my heart recognizes something my mind hasn't figured out yet." Nora stared at him, this incredible man who wanted to offer her everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too," Gary replied honestly, feeling frightened. "But I'm even more afraid of letting you go than I am of fully committing to this." At that moment, Miguel reached for Gary, making soft sounds to get his attention. Gary quickly picked him up, and the baby snuggled against his chest with a happy sigh. "See?" Gary said softly. "He knows. Kids always know." 3 hours later, Nora stood in Judge Patricia Hendriss's office, wearing a simple yet nice dress Maria had found for her, holding Marcus. Gary held Miguel as they listened to the kind woman in the black robe ask if they understood the commitment they were about to make. "Mr. Welch," Judge Hicks said, "you understand that by adopting Miguel and Marcus, you take on all legal and financial responsibility for them until they are grown, no matter what happens in your marriage?" "Yes, Your Honor," Gary said firmly. "I want that responsibility. These are my sons." "And Miss Niola," the judge continued, "you know that you are giving Mr. Welch full parental rights, and he will be their father legally and in every way." "Yes, Your Honor," Nora replied, watching Gary hold Miguel with such care. "I can't think of anyone better for that role." The paperwork felt like it took forever, but finally Judge Hriss smiled at them and said the words that made it official. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Welch. Miguel and Marcus are now legally your sons." Nora tried out her new name, Mrs. Welch, and liked how it sounded. Their wedding ceremony was short but beautiful. Maria and her husband Carlos watched proudly as Gary and Nora exchanged their vows, which they had written that morning. "Gary," he said, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly as he held Nora's, "I promise to love you and Miguel and Marcus with everything I have. I promise to be the husband you deserve and a father to them. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." Nora replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I promise to trust you with my heart and my children's hearts. I promise to build a life together based on love, not fear. I will be your partner in everything for as long as you want me." When Judge Hendricks declared them husband and wife, Gary's kiss was gentle, filled with hope rather than passion. When he pulled back and whispered, "I love you, Mrs. Welch," Nora felt a warmth in her chest. "I love you too," she whispered back, surprised to realize she truly meant it. The rest of the day flew by, filled with small moments that felt like pieces of a puzzle coming together. Gary insisted on stopping at a jewelry store to buy wedding rings, while Maria took hundreds of pictures. The twins were remarkably calm for babies whose world had changed so much in one day. That evening, after the babies were asleep in their new nursery, Gary had transformed the guest room. Nora found herself standing on the balcony, looking out at Seattle's skyline, trying to process everything that had happened. "Regrets?" Gary asked softly, joining her. "No," Nora said, surprised by how sure she sounded. "I'm just overwhelmed. Yesterday I was lost. Today I'm married to a man I barely know, and I have 2 sons with a secure future." "About that," Gary said carefully, "I hope you don't mind, but I set up accounts for them. College funds, savings for when they are older, and medical accounts. I want them to have every opportunity." Nora looked at him. "Why would I mind? You're making sure they have a good future." "Some might think I'm trying to buy their love or yours." "Are you?" Gary paused. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "Last night I would have done anything to convince you to say yes. But now it's not about buying anything. It's about providing for my family." "My family," he added, and the words brought a warmth to Nora's heart. "Gary," she said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" "We're married now," he said with a smile. "Everything's personal. What was Sarah like? I feel like I should know about the woman who was in your life before." Gary's expression turned soft and sad. "She was like sunshine. She made everyone feel happier and more hopeful. She always saw the best in people. She would have loved you immediately. She would have admired your strength and kindness. Do you think she would approve of us? Gary took a long time to answer. I think she sent you to me. I think she knew I was lost without her and wanted me to find love again. Nora felt tears in her eyes. That's a beautiful thought. It's what I believe, and I think she'd want you to know that loving you doesn't lessen what I felt for her. It honors her because she showed me that love grows when shared. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights below. Finally, Gary spoke again. There's something else I want to talk to you about. I know we agreed to take things slow, but I want you to know I don't want to sleep apart forever. Not because I expect anything, he added quickly, but because I want to fall asleep next to my wife and wake up with you in my arms. I want us to be a real family in every way. Nora felt her heart race. Gary, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, he said quickly. But when you're ready for more than just a marriage of convenience, it'll be here. Looking at this wonderful man who had changed her life, Nora felt warmth in her heart for the first time since Jerome had left. Gary was not only handsome, but also kind. He looked at her like she was special, not just someone to settle for. What if I'm ready now? She asked quietly. Gary's breath caught. You don't have to. I know, she interrupted. But you said you needed a family. So do I. I need a husband who loves me seriously. I need someone who sees me as a partner, not as someone to help out. And I need someone who wants me as a woman too. Gary stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I want you, he said, his voice thick with honesty. I want you so much it feels overwhelming. But I want to do this the right way. I want to earn your love, your trust, and your heart. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything. What if I told you that you've already earned it? Nora asked, placing her hand gently on his cheek. What if I said that watching you with Miguel and Marcus today made me care about you even more? That I want to share your space tonight, not because I have to, but because I want to start something real with you. Gary's eyes softened. He smiled and leaned his forehead against hers. Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man in the world, he whispered. And I'd ask if I could kiss my wife properly for the first time. Please, Nora replied. When Gary kissed her, it was nothing like their quiet wedding kiss. This one was deep, filled with emotion, and all the pain of the past days started to turn into something hopeful. The weight of years spent feeling unloved began to lift. Nora leaned into him, feeling how close they'd become. When the kiss ended, they were both out of breath. Gary rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said softly. I know it's early, but it's true. I love you, Nora Welch. I love you too, she whispered, truly meaning it. Gary picked her up and carried her toward their room. Nora thought about how second chances sometimes arrive when you least expect them. Behind them, the city lights sparkled, and in the distance, thunder rolled like a quiet celebration from the sky. Chapter 4. When Love Grows. 3 months had passed since that rainy night that changed everything. But sometimes Nora still woke up expecting to be back in the shelter, holding tired children, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Instead, she woke in soft sheets, next to Gary's quiet breathing. Their marriage had found a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Gary worked from home more often now. The boys played near his desk while he handled meetings. Nora, with Gary's encouragement, had enrolled in online business classes. She was learning fast and had a real talent for marketing and social media. What surprised Nora the most wasn't the comfort or the new chances. It was how natural it felt to be his wife. How much joy she found in the simple things, his goodbyes in the morning, the sound of his keys at the door in the evening, and their quiet talks at night. They hadn't crossed any big lines yet, though they'd shared close moments, long hugs, deep kisses, soft touches. But Gary always moved slowly, as if he was protecting her. And Nora, though she cared deeply, still carried hurt from the past that made her hold back. Tonight felt different. A storm rolled outside, strong and steady, much like the one that had brought them together. The twins were asleep, and Gary was working in his study. Nora stood by the window, watching the flashes of light across the sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Gary said, walking in. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired but at peace. "I love storms," Nora said quietly. "Always have. My grandmother used to say they cleaned the world, washed away what wasn't needed." Gary stood beside her, close but calm. "Maybe that's what happened to us. The storm helped us start over." "Maybe," Nora smiled, leaning gently into his side. "Or maybe it helped us find each other." They stood in silence, the storm a soft roar behind the glass. Nora felt the warmth of Gary beside her, the way his arms circled her waist, the calm strength of his presence. "Gary," she said, her voice unsure but steady. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. I'm ready. I want to be with you." Gary's hands gently tightened around her waist. "Are you sure, Nora?" he asked, his voice low and careful. "This means everything. No turning back." "I've been yours since the night you found me in the rain," she said, touching his face. "I've just been waiting for you to know it too." Outside, lightning lit the sky again. Gary's face changed. His gentle smile deepened with emotion. "I've tried to be patient," he said. "I've waited because I wanted to honor your pace. But I want to be close to you more than I can say." "Then don't wait anymore," Nora whispered. "We're safe now." Gary kissed her, holding her close. It was full of everything they had held back, everything they felt. Nora clung to him, her hands around his shoulders. He held her gently but with purpose, grounding her like the calm center of the storm outside. He carried her to their room as the thunder rolled in the distance, quiet but strong like the start of something new and real. He set her down gently, keeping his gaze on her, as he carefully slipped the straps of her nightgown from her shoulders. "Are you sure?" he asked again, his hands trembling slightly from holding back. "I've never been more sure of anything," Nora replied, helping him ease the silk down her body. When Gary saw her completely for the first time, his eyes filled with admiration. "Hermosa," he whispered in Spanish. "Absolutely beautiful." Gary's touch was soft yet confident as he traced her skin, almost as if he were trying to remember every detail. Each kiss and gentle touch expressed his love and commitment. When they finally came together, their eyes locked, and it felt like home. "I love you," Gary whispered softly as they connected. "I love you so much, Nora. You saved me." "You saved me too," she gasped, tangling her fingers in his hair. "You gave me everything." Thunder rumbled above as they lost themselves in each other. 3 months of careful closeness erupted into deep love. Gary cherished her as if she were the most precious thing, and Nora opened her heart to him completely. When they finally rested together, breathless, Gary held her close, planting kisses into her hair. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Only that we waited so long," Nora answered, tracing small patterns on his chest with her fingertips. Gary laughed, the sound warm and grounding. "I wanted this to be right. Wanted you to feel certain." "I was certain the night you proposed in the rain," Nora said, tilting her head to gaze at him. "But Gary, I need you to understand something. What we just shared wasn't just physical for me. When you treat me with such love, it heals parts of me I thought were lost." Gary's eyes sparkled with emotion. "Jerome really hurt you, didn't he?" Nora nodded, unable to speak. "Look at me," Gary said gently, lifting her chin. "You are precious. You deserve love and joy. Anyone who made you feel otherwise was foolish." "How do you always know what to say?" Nora asked, feeling tears in her eyes. "Because I love you," Gary replied simply. "When you love someone the way I love you, their happiness becomes your priority." They sat in a comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm outside as they embraced the warmth of their love. Eventually, Nora spoke. "Gary, I want more children," she said quietly. "I want to give you a child, a piece of us together." Gary's arms tightened around her. "Are you sure? Miguel and Marcus are already so much." "I know they are," Nora said, kissing his chest. "But I want to see what a baby with your eyes and my spirit would be like. I want you to experience feeling your child move, to be there for the birth." Gary's voice was heavy with emotion. Nothing would make me happier, but only if you're sure. If this is what you want too, not just what you think I want. Am sure, Nora replied firmly. I want to build a family with you. I wanted all the sleepless nights, the joyful chaos, every part of it. Gary looked serious as he held her gaze. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. I want you to stop taking birth control, but also see the best doctors for care. I want to ensure you and any baby we have are safe and healthy. Okay, Nora agreed, touched by his thoughtfulness. And I want to marry you again, Gary said suddenly. What? Nora laughed. We're already married. I want to marry you because I love you, not just because of what we've been through, Gary explained. I want a real wedding with your family, with vows from love, not pain. I want to choose you every day for the rest of our lives. Nora felt a swell of love for this incredible man. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything, the wedding, the children, choosing one another. Each kiss was soft and full of hope. Outside, the storm began to settle, but inside their room, a different kind of storm was just starting the beautiful, chaotic love that would endure. As they shared tender moments together, Nora reflected on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she felt lost, convinced she was not worthy of love. Now, she was cherished and deeply loved by a man who saw her as his equal. I love you, Gary Welch, she whispered as they held each other close. And I love you, Nora Welch, he replied. Always and forever. Outside, the last of the thunder rumbled away, leaving the gentle sound of rain against the windows. This was the same rain that had brought them together, now blessing their union as they truly became one. Chapter 5. Building Our Kingdom. 6 months after their heartfelt night, Nora stood before the bathroom mirror, staring at the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 clear pink lines, unmistakable. She was expecting Gary's child. Tears of joy streamed down her face, filled with gratitude and a love that brought her to the brink of tears. After everything, she was carrying the child of the man who had saved her. Mommy? Miguel's voice came from the doorway, his little face showing concern. He and Marcus, still toddlers, were learning to walk and talk with Gary's gentle support, speaking both English and Spanish. Why crying? Miguel asked, waddling into the bathroom with his twin brother close behind. Happy tears, Nora assured him, kneeling to hug both boys tightly. Mommy has very happy tears. Papa make you happy? Marcus asked, his tiny hand patting her cheek. Papa makes me very happy, Nora confirmed, her heart swelling with warmth. Both boys had started calling Gary Papa naturally, without any prompting. Gary's eyes had misted the first time Miguel had reached for him and said, Papa up, and Nora had fallen even deeper in love, watching him embrace fatherhood. Where's Papa? Miguel asked. Papa's working, Nora said, standing up and taking their hands. But guess what? We're going to surprise him. The boys cheered at the chance to visit Gary's office. Nora's hands trembled as she dressed them, her mind racing with how to share the news with Gary. They had been hoping for a baby for 3 months now, and while Gary never rushed her, she could see the sparkle of hope in his eyes each month, waiting for her to tell him good news. Gary's office was on the top floor of the Welch Industries building, and the boys knew the way by heart. They burst through the doors of his suite like small whirlwinds, calling, Papa, Papa! Loudly. Gary immediately paused his call, a bright smile spreading across his face as Miguel and Marcus jumped into his arms. Miss Hayos, he said, catching them both in a hug. What are you doing here? Mommy has happy tears, Marcus announced proudly. Gary quickly spotted Nora across the room, worry showing in his eyes. She had happy tears. We need to talk, Nora said, her voice shaky. Privately? Gary's assistant, Janet, stepped forward. I'll take the boys to the break room. There are cookies and juice boxes, and I think Miguel wanted to see the new fish. Fish! The boys shouted as they followed her away. Once they were alone, Gary went to Nora and held her face in his hands. What's wrong? Are you okay? Imperfect, Nora said, pulling a pregnancy test from her purse. We're perfect. Gary stared at it in surprise, his feelings shifting from shock to joy. Is this real? We're having a baby. Nora whispered. Gary shouted with joy, spinning her around while laughter and some tears mixed together. When he set her down, he kissed her all over her face. I love you, he said between kisses. Are you happy? Are you scared? How do you feel? I'm everything, Nora laughed. Happy, scared, excited, overwhelmed, but mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful that our baby will have you as a father. Gary knelt in front of her, resting his head on her stomach. Hello, little one, he whispered. This is your papa. I can't wait to meet you. As Nora ran her fingers through his hair, she felt warmth seeing him talk so softly to their unborn child. Looking up at her, Gary said, I want to do something meaningful. I've been thinking about it for weeks. He paused, his hand on her stomach. I want to start a foundation for women like I was single mothers and those who need help getting back on their feet. Gary stood up slowly, looking serious. Tell me more. I want to call it the Sarah and Gabriel Foundation, Nora said, watching his reaction. I want to create a place where women can get job training, child care, and support so they can build their lives with dignity. Gary's breath caught and tears filled his eyes. Nora. Sarah was a nurse, Nora continued. She helped children, and I want to help their mothers. I want to turn pain into something beautiful that honors her memory while building our future. You want to name it after Sarah? Gary asked quietly. I want to honor the woman who loved you first, Nora said firmly. The one who taught you how to love and made you the man I fell for. I also want to honor Gabriel, the son you'll always hold in your heart, along with the children we will raise together. Gary embraced her tightly. How did I get so lucky? He whispered in her hair. How did I find someone who understands that loving Sarah doesn't mean loving you less? Because love multiplies, Nora replied, recalling what Gary had shared with her before. Your love for Sarah allows you to love me, Miguel, and this baby. It all connects. The Sarah and Gabriel Foundation, Gary repeated, testing the name. I love it, and I want to fund it completely, whatever it takes. It's not just about the money, Nora said, although she appreciated his support. It's about creating something lasting that helps women see they deserve love, respect, and second chances. 6 weeks later, Nora stood outside the newly renovated community center set to house the foundation, her hand on her growing belly. Morning sickness had been tough, but Gary had been amazing, always there to help her. Today was the grand opening, and Nora felt nervous. They had invited local media, city officials, and many women who wanted to join the program. Miguel and Marcus were with Maria, dressed neatly for the special event, eager to see their mother's work. Ready for this? Gary asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. I think so, Nora replied, leaning back against him. It feels unreal. Just 6 months ago, I needed a place like this. Now I'm running it. And you're going to change lives, Gary said, kissing her temple, just like you changed mine. The ceremony was lovely. Gary spoke about Sarah's legacy of helping others, his voice strong as he honored her memory. Nora shared about second chances and the strength of community, her passion clear in every word. The moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes was when Miguel and Marcus walked up to the microphone. This place helps mommies, Miguel said proudly. Like our mommy, Marcus added. Papa says all mommies deserve love, Miguel continued. And all babies deserve papas, Marcus finished. The crowd cheered, and Nora felt her heart swell with pride. Her boys understood that love comes in many forms and that families are built on choice, not just biology. After the ceremony, while touring the facility's job training rooms, a child care center, counseling offices, and even temporary housing, Nora was amazed by the positive response. Women came to her with tears of gratitude, thanking her for providing a space where they could rebuild their lives. One young mother, holding a baby who seemed no older than 6 months, said, Mrs. Welch, I read about the foundation online. My boyfriend left when he found out I was pregnant. I've been living in my car for 3 weeks. Nora's heart broke, yet she felt hopeful. What's your name? Rosa Martinez. Rosa, you're going to be okay, Nora said firmly, taking her hands. We're going to help you find housing and get you into our job training program. You're not alone anymore." As they spoke, Gary appeared with Rosa's paperwork, ready to help. Seeing his compassion, Nora fell in love with him anew. That night, after the boys were asleep, Gary and Nora sat in their living room, her feet resting in his lap as he rubbed them gently. "Today was perfect," Nora said, her hand on her belly. "You were perfect," Gary replied. "Watching you with those women, seeing how you made them feel valued and hopeful, made me so proud to be your husband." "We make a good team," Nora said softly. "The best team," Gary agreed, placing his hand over hers on her stomach. "How's our little one doing?" "Active," Nora laughed. "I think he or she enjoyed all the excitement." "Speaking of excitement," Gary said, his expression turning serious, "I want to ask you something." "What is it?" "I want us to renew our vows," Gary said. "I know we talked about it before, but with the baby coming and everything we're building together, I want to marry you again. Not because we're desperate, but because we're happy in choosing each other every day." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too." "I want your family there this time," Gary continued. "I want Miguel and Marcus to be a part of the ceremony. I want to celebrate not just our love, but our family and our future." "When?" Nora asked. "Before the baby comes," Gary said. "I want to make my promises to you while you're carrying our child, and while Miguel and Marcus can understand what's happening. I want them to see their parents choosing love every single day." "I love you, Gary Welch," Nora said, leaning in to gently kiss him. "I love you too, Nora Welch," he replied, "more than I ever thought possible." As they sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by pictures of their boys and plans for their foundation, and with their baby growing safely inside her, Nora marveled at how much her life had changed. She had gone from struggling in the rain to creating a life filled with love and hope, and the best part was that this was just the beginning. Chapter 6. The Storms We Weather. At 7 months pregnant, Nora had never felt more beautiful or more vulnerable. Her belly had rounded nicely, and Gary loved to touch it. Miguel and Marcus, now almost 3 years old, enjoyed talking with their little sibling every evening before bed. The Sarah and Gabriel Foundation was doing well, having helped over 100 women in its first 6 months, and their vow renewal was set for next month. Everything felt perfect, and Nora knew that was usually when life decided to test you. The first challenge came on a Tuesday morning with a visit from Patricia Welch, Gary's mother. Nora had met her only once at their small courthouse wedding, and Patricia had clearly shown her dislike back then. Nora opened the door expecting a package, but instead saw an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair and blue eyes like Gary's, filled with contempt. "Mrs. Welch," Patricia said, her tone overly polite. "We need to talk." "Patricia," Nora replied carefully, instinctively placing a hand on her belly. "Gary's at the office. I can call him." "I'm not here to see my son," Patricia interrupted, walking past Nora into the apartment. "I'm here to see you." Miguel and Marcus looked up from their toys, sensing the tension in the room. Nora quickly moved to them, gathering them close. "Boys, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes?" she suggested softly. "But Mommy," Miguel started. "Go on, I'll be right there." Once the boys were gone, Patricia turned to Nora, her expression cold and hard. "I'll get straight to the point. I know what you really are." "Excuse me?" "A gold digger," Patricia said sharply. "A woman who trapped my grieving son into marriage with your sob story and those children." Nora felt her anger rise, but she kept her voice steady. "Those children are Gary's sons. He adopted them and loves them completely. Those children are not Welch blood, just like the baby you're carrying isn't really my grandchild." Patricia's words stung, but Nora fought to stay calm. "You need to leave now." "Not until I make you an offer," Patricia said, pulling a check from her designer bag. $5 million. Take it, disappear with your children, and never contact Gary again. Nora stared at the check, her heart racing with rage. "You think you can buy me?" "I think you're smart enough to recognize a good deal," Patricia replied. $5 million is more money than you could ever hope to see otherwise." "Someone like me?" Nora's voice was quiet. A poor Hispanic woman with children from different fathers, using your looks and your situation to trap a wealthy man, Patricia stated coldly. Did you really think Gary would stay interested once the novelty wore off? Each word aimed to hurt, to exploit old insecurities. But then Nora remembered the love Gary showed her and their children. She recalled moments of joy they shared together. Get out, Nora said firmly. Think about it, Patricia pressed, leaving the check on the coffee table. Gary will tire of you eventually. Rich men always do. This way you'll at least have something to show for it. I said, get out. Nora's voice rose, and she heard the boys' bedroom door open. Mommy, Marcus called out. That's when Patricia made a big mistake. She looked at the boys with clear disdain. Those children will never be Welch's. They don't belong here. An intense protectiveness surged in Nora. Nobody speaks about my children that way. You want to know what I think of your offer? Patricia smiled, thinking she had convinced Nora. Nora ripped the check into pieces, letting them fall to the floor. I think you're a sad, bitter woman who raised a son despite yourself. Gary is who he is in spite of you. If you ever speak about my children that way again or come into our home uninvited, I will make sure Gary knows the truth about you. Patricia's face grew red with anger. How dare you? How dare I love your son? Be a good mother to children who need one? Build a life based on respect instead of money? Nora stepped closer, her belly between them like a defense. I'm not going anywhere, Patricia. This is my home. These are my children and Gary is my husband. We're a family and nothing will change that. Gary will see through you eventually, Patricia hissed. Maybe, Nora replied calmly. But until then, I will love him with everything I have. I'll be the wife he deserves and the mother his children need. And when our baby is born, I'll make sure they know they have one grandmother who loves them. Patricia gathered her purse, her composure shaking. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Nora said firmly, opening the door. Because Gary will choose us. He already has. After Patricia left, Nora collapsed onto the couch, trembling with emotion. Miguel and Marcus peeked out of their room and quickly climbed onto her lap. Mommy sad? Miguel asked, patting her face. Just tired, baby, Nora said, holding them close. But I'm okay. When Gary came home that evening, he found Nora on the balcony looking out over the city. He could tell something was wrong. What happened? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Nora leaned into his warmth, feeling strengthened by his presence. Your mother visited me today. Gary's grip tightened. What did she say? Nora explained everything. The check, the harsh words about the children, the offer to leave. With each detail, she felt Gary's tension grow. She offered you $5 million to leave me? Nora nodded. She called Miguel and Marcus unwanted, she said, and saw Gary flinch. She said they weren't part of their family, that they didn't belong in their world. Gary stayed quiet for a moment, his hands protectively resting on her belly. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm but firm. She's crossed a line, Gary said. I warned her when we got married that you and the boys were my family now, and anyone who couldn't accept that wouldn't be in our lives. She's your mother, Nora replied. She stopped being my mother the moment she tried to break my family, Gary said firmly. Being blood-related doesn't give anyone the right to hurt the people I love. That night, Gary called his mother. Nora could hear his voice through the closed door, filled with controlled anger. When he came out, his expression was serious. She's cut off, he said. From the family business, from the family trust, from our lives. If she ever contacts you or the kids again, I'll take legal action. Nora, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, he insisted, pulling her close. You, Miguel, Marcus, and this baby are my everything. I'll protect that with all I have. 2 weeks later, Jerome's unexpected return created a different kind of trouble. Nora was at a meeting with new clients when Janet called to tell her Jerome was in the lobby asking to see her. Her heart sank. Jerome had given up all parental rights 2 years ago when he left, but his sudden return worried her. Send him up, Nora instructed, moving her hand protectively over her belly. But get Gary. Tell him Jerome's here. When Jerome entered her office, he looked older and thinner, his eyes darting around with a calculating glance. "Well, well," he said with a smirk. "Look who's doing well." "What do you want, Jerome?" Nora asked, standing firm behind her desk. "Half of everything you have from your rich husband," he replied casually. "I think I deserve it for giving you the kids." Nora's anger surged. "You gave up your rights to Miguel and Marcus. You don't have any claim." "That's where you're wrong," he said, pulling out a wrinkled paper. "I have copies of the unsigned documents. I may have given up some rights, but as their biological father, I still want payment for my contribution." "They're not your children," Nora insisted, standing tall despite her pregnancy. "You walked away from them. You left us with nothing." Jerome grinned. 15 million should cover it. Half of what your husband is worth. "Leave now," Nora demanded. "Make me," he challenged, moving closer. "Or better yet, tell your husband he should pay up if he wants to keep his little secret safe." Just then, Gary's voice came from the doorway. "The only thing that's going to happen is that you're going to be removed from this office." Jerome turned, fear flashing in his eyes when he saw Gary's strong presence. Behind him were security guards and a police officer. "Gary," Nora sighed in relief. "Mr. Rodriguez is leaving now," Gary said, keeping his eyes on Jerome. "This isn't over," Jerome sneered, though his confidence was wavering. "It is," Gary replied. "My lawyers have the original documents. You signed away your rights and received compensation. You have no legal claim to Miguel and Marcus. If you ever come near my family again, I will take action." As the police escorted Jerome out, Gary turned to Nora, holding her close. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're fine," Nora said, though she was trembling. "But what if he tries again?" "He won't," Gary said firmly. "I've already filed for restraining orders. He can't hurt us anymore." That night, they lay in bed with Miguel and Marcus sleeping close by, both boys wanting to be near them after the day's events. Nora admired Gary's strength. "Thank you," she whispered in the dark, "for protecting us and for making me feel safe." "Always," he replied, holding her hand. "In every storm, I choose you. We will fight for what we have, no matter what happens." As Nora drifted off to sleep surrounded by her family, she felt confident that they could face whatever challenges came their way together. They were stronger than any outside threats because they had a love that was genuine and unbreakable. Chapter 7. Life and Love. At 32 weeks pregnant, Nora felt as if she was carrying a small basketball that kicked constantly, making sleep difficult. They had recently learned they were expecting a girl, and according to Dr. Martinez, everything seemed to be going well until that morning when everything changed. Nora woke up to a strange feeling and a cramping sensation that took her breath away. At first, she thought it was just usual pregnancy discomfort. But when she tried to stand and felt wetness, fear began to set in. "Gary," she whispered, shaking him urgently. "I think my water broke." He quickly sat up, noticing her worried face. "What's wrong?" "But it's too early," she stammered. "She's not due for 8 more weeks." Gary sprang into action, grabbing his phone and helping her to the bathroom. "Call Dr. Martinez," he instructed, already dialing 911. "Tell her we're on our way." The next hour was a blur of ambulance sirens and medical activity. Miguel and Marcus were quickly dropped off with Maria, their sleepy faces filled with confusion, as Gary promised them Mommy and the baby would be okay. But as they sped through the city to the hospital, Nora's worry deepened. "It's too early," she kept repeating, her hand on her belly where their daughter was unusually still. "What if something is wrong?" "She's going to be okay," Gary said, trying to reassure her. "She's strong, just like her mother." At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Dr. Martinez greeted them at the entrance, her usual calm demeanor now urgent as she examined Nora. "Your membranes have definitely ruptured," she confirmed, "and you're already dilating. We have to deliver the baby today." "Today?" Nora's voice was small and scared. "But she's only 32 weeks. What if she's not ready?" "Babies born at 32 weeks have good survival rates," Dr. Martinez assured her, though her face stayed serious. "Our NICU is one of the best in the country. But Nora, I need to be honest with you. There are some complications. Gary held Nora's hand tightly. What kind of complications? Your blood pressure is very high and we see signs of preeclampsia, along with the early rupture of membranes. We need to deliver the baby right away. We're looking at an emergency section. The words hit Nora hard. Preeclampsia, emergency surgery. Their tiny daughter fighting for life in an incubator instead of staying safe in Nora's womb for 2 more months. Is she going to be okay? Nora asked, tears rolling down her cheeks. We're going to do everything we can, Dr. Martinez said softly. But right now, I'm more worried about you. Preeclampsia can be dangerous if we don't act quickly. The operating room was bright with blinding lights and faces she couldn't see clearly. Gary was beside Nora's head, still in regular clothes, but wearing a surgical cap and mask. He kept his eyes on hers as the anesthesia made everything feel fuzzy. I'm scared, Nora whispered. I'm right here, Gary said, his voice steady even though she could see tears in his eyes. You're the strongest woman I know. You can do this. What if something happens to me? Nora asked, voicing the fear that had been growing inside her. Promise me you'll take care of Miguel and Marcus. Promise me you'll tell our daughter about me. Stop, Gary said firmly, leaning down to touch her forehead with his. You're going to be fine. You're going to hold our daughter and watch her grow up. You're going to see Miguel and Marcus graduate. You're going to grow old with me, Nora, because I'm not letting you go anywhere. You'll see. Surgery felt like it took both a long time and no time at all. Nora drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of pressure and movement, but feeling disconnected from her body. She heard voices, urgent and worried, but couldn't make out the words. Then she heard it, a tiny, angry cry that made her heart swell. She's breathing on her own, someone said, and Nora felt Gary's tears on her face. Is she okay? Nora managed to ask. She's perfect, Gary said with a mix of joy and relief. 4 pounds 2 ounces of pure joy. She's breathing, crying, moving. She's okay, Nora. Our little girl is okay. But even as relief flooded her, Nora sensed something was wrong. The voices around her grew more urgent, and Gary's face above her looked pale. What's happening? She tried to ask, but her voice wouldn't come out right. Nora, stay with me. Dr. Martinez's voice broke through the fog. We're having some bleeding complications. I need you to stay awake for me. The next few hours were the longest for Gary. He held their daughter, Sophia Grace Welch, named after their grandmothers, in the NICU, while Nora fought for her well-being in surgery. Sophia was tiny but strong, her little fists moving as she breathed with help. Her dark hair, just like Nora's, tugged at Gary's heart. Your mama is fighting for you, little one, he whispered to Sophia, his finger stroking her tiny hand through the incubator. She's the strongest person I know. She's going to be okay because she has to be. Miguel and Marcus arrived with Maria, their 3-year-old faces serious as they gazed at their tiny sister through the glass. She's small, Miguel observed. Very small, Marcus agreed. Like a baby bird. She's going to grow big and strong, Gary told them, though his voice cracked with emotion. Just like you did. Where's Mommy? Miguel asked, and Gary's heart broke. Mommy is with the doctors, Gary said gently. She's sick right now, but they're taking very good care of her. Is Mommy going to be okay? Marcus asked, his little lip trembling. Yes, Gary said firmly, because any other answer was unthinkable. Mommy is going to be okay. Hours passed. Sophia's condition stayed stable, her vital signs strong despite her early arrival. But Nora remained in surgery, and with each passing hour, Gary's worry grew. Finally, Dr. Martinez appeared, still in scrubs and looking tired but relieved. She's stable, she said, and Gary felt a flood of relief wash over him. We had some bleeding issues, but we have it under control. She's lost a lot of blood and she'll need time to recover, but she will be okay. Can I see her? Gary asked. She's in recovery now. She'll be resting for a few more hours, but you can sit with her. Nora looked so small and pale in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines. Gary moved a chair close and took her hand, careful of the IV lines. I'm here, he whispered, bringing her hand to his lips. Sophia is beautiful, Nora. She looks just like you. She's in the NICU now, but she's breathing on her own. The doctors say she's doing wonderfully for 32 weeks. He talked to her for hours, sharing all about Sophia's first cry, how Miguel and Marcus had named their sister Baby Bird, and how many people were praying for them both. When Nora finally opened her eyes 18 hours later, the first thing she said was, "Sophia, she's perfect." Gary immediately felt tears stream down his face. 4 pounds, 2 ounces of absolute perfection. "Do you want to see her?" "Please," Nora whispered. It took another day before Nora was well enough to visit the NICU. When she saw Sophia for the first time, tiny and perfect, with dark hair and Gary's chin, she broke down completely. "She's so small," Nora said tearfully, pressing her hand against the incubator. "But she's strong," Gary said, his arm around Nora's wheelchair. "Look at her oxygen levels. She's breathing even better than some full-term babies. She's a fighter, just like her mother." "I was so scared," Nora confessed. "When everything went wrong, when I felt myself slipping away, all I could think about was you and the boys and never meeting her." "But you didn't," Gary said firmly. "You fought, and you're here, and we're all together. That's what matters." They spent the next 6 weeks living at the hospital. Gary moved his office to Sophia's NICU room, holding meetings via video call while Nora pumped milk and Miguel and Marcus colored pictures for their sister's incubator. The day Sophia was finally strong enough to go home was one of the happiest of their lives. At 6 pounds and perfectly healthy, she looked huge compared to the tiny baby they'd first met. "Welcome home, baby bird," Miguel said earnestly as they brought her into the penthouse. "Welcome home, Sophia," Marcus added. That night, as they sat in the nursery, Nora in the rocking chair feeding Sophia while Gary read bedtime stories to Miguel and Marcus, Gary marveled at how close they had come to losing it all. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked softly. "How much I love you," Gary replied simply. "How grateful I am that you're both okay. How perfect our family is. Even after everything that went wrong, especially after everything that went wrong," Gary said, "because it reminded me that nothing is guaranteed. Every day we spend together is special." Sophia made a soft sound against Nora's chest, and both parents looked at her with love. "She's going to be spoiled," Nora said with a smile. "Especially by her big brothers," Gary added, watching Miguel pat Sophia's tiny hand gently. "I want to have our vow renewal ceremony soon," Nora said. "After almost losing each other, I want to celebrate what we have while we can." "Next month sounds great," Gary agreed, "as soon as Sophia is strong enough to be our flower girl." "She'll be only 3 months old," Nora laughed. "Then Miguel and Marcus can help carry her down the aisle," Gary said, smiling. "Our whole family will be part of this new beginning." That night, as they tucked their children into bed, with Sophia in her crib and Miguel and Marcus in their toddler beds, Nora felt a peace she had never known before. They had faced difficulties together, but had emerged stronger, more united, and more grateful for the love they shared. "I love you, Gary Welch," she whispered, as they finally settled into their own bed. "I love you too, Nora Welch," he replied, pulling her close. "Forever and always, no matter what comes." Outside, the city lights twinkled in the dark. Inside their home, everything felt warm and safe. Their family was whole, their love strong, and a bright future awaited them. Chapter 8. Renewed Vows. The memorial garden where Gary had once knelt in the rain had transformed into something beautiful. 3 years after their first meeting, Gary bought the entire city block and created a lovely place where fountains flowed and flowers bloomed all year round. Today, it would be the setting for their vow renewal, a true celebration of their love. Nora stood in the bridal suite of a nearby hotel, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The flowing ivory dress she wore was nothing like the simple outfit from their first ceremony. This gown was elegant and perfectly fitted, but what took her breath away was the joy on her face. "Mommy, pretty," Sophia said from her high chair, clapping her little hands. At 8 months old, their daughter was the perfect mix of her parents. "Thank you, sweetie," Nora replied, adjusting the delicate tiara that held her veil, which had been passed down from Gary's grandmother. When Gary gave it to her, Nora felt an overwhelming sense of honor wearing something that connected her to the woman who had loved Gary first. Miguel and Marcus burst through the door, looking smart in their tiny tuxedos, their hair neatly styled. "Mommy!" Miguel shouted. "Papa says it's time. Papa is crying," Marcus added seriously. "Happy tears, just like you." Nora's heart swelled with love. The boys, now 4 years old, were truly Gary's sons. They spoke both English and Spanish, and they had grown into kind, loving children who called her Mommy and him Papa without any confusion. "Are you ready to walk with your sister down the aisle?" Nora asked as Maria adjusted the flower girl basket Sophia would sit in. The boys carefully pushed the decorated stroller, with Sophia sitting proudly inside it. "See, Mommy!" they shouted in unison. The music began, not the usual wedding march, but a lively tune Nora had hummed the first night they met in the rain. Gary had arranged for a mariachi band, celebrating Nora's heritage in a way that made her feel honored. As the doors opened, Nora saw the crowd of people who had become family. Her cousin Maria from Los Angeles had flown in, along with Rosa Martinez, now a successful medical assistant. Dozens of women whose lives had been touched by the Sarah and Gabriel Foundation came to support them. And in the front row sat Dr. Martinez, who had saved both Nora and Sophia, but it was Gary who took her breath away. He stood at the fountain where they had first met, dressed in a smart black tuxedo. When he saw her, his face filled with emotion, and he pressed his hand to his heart, as if the sight of her was overwhelming. Miguel and Marcus walked ahead, carefully pushing Sophia's stroller, and their daughter gleefully reached for the flower petals. When Nora reached Gary, he was in tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered, taking her hands. "So perfect." "So are you," she replied. Gary had grown even more handsome, his fatherly love glowing in his eyes. Their efficient, a family friend, smiled at everyone gathered. "We come today not to see the start of their love story, but to celebrate its continuation." He began, "3 years ago in the rain, two broken hearts found each other and chose to heal together. Today they choose each other again from a place of joy." Gary had written his vows this time, and as he opened the paper, his hands trembled. "Nora," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "3 years ago, I lost everything that mattered to me, and I was lost. Then I found you, or you found me, and you didn't just save me. You gave me a life worth living." He paused, glancing at Miguel and Marcus nearby. "You gave me sons who call me Papa. You gave me a daughter who looks at me like the world. You gave me a purpose through our foundation, a home full of laughter, and a love deeper than I ever thought possible." Nora was crying now, but she didn't care about her makeup. "Most importantly," Gary continued, "you showed me that love grows when shared. My love for Sarah didn't lessen my love for you. It made me capable of loving you more. And our love for Miguel and Marcus doesn't take away from Sophia. It makes our family stronger." He looked into her eyes. "So today, I choose you again, not because I need you, but because I want you. I choose you, Nora Welch, every day for the rest of my life." When it was Nora's turn, her words flowed from her heart. "Gary, 3 years ago, you saw what you had lost when you looked at me, but you also saw what I have always been. You saw a mother's love, a woman's strength, and a heart ready to heal. You didn't save me from a tough life. You showed me the treasure I always was." She reached out to touch his face, smiling through her tears. "You took 2 lost boys and gave them hope. You loved them so much that they never doubt their value. You gave me a daughter who will always know she is loved. You built a foundation that has helped many women see their own worth." Her voice grew stronger. "Today I choose you not for your wealth or power, but because you have the biggest heart I've ever known. I choose you because you make me laugh, because you sing silly lullabies to our children, because you still hold my hand when we walk together." She looked at their children, then back at him. "I choose our beautiful, messy, perfect family. I choose this love that began in the rain and has only grown stronger through every challenge." When they exchanged new rings inscribed with "Love Multiplies," there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. "You may kiss your wife," the officiant said with a smile. Gary's kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and joy. When they pulled away, Miguel and Marcus cheered. Sophia clapped her small hands, and the band began to play a joyful song. The reception was held in the hotel's rooftop garden overlooking the city where their love story had begun. As Gary twirled Nora around the dance floor, both of them laughed like young kids. She marveled at how far they'd come. "Do you ever miss it?" Gary asked, as they swayed to a slow tune, the simplicity of earlier days when it was just about getting by. "Never," Nora replied firmly. "I don't miss being hungry or frightened or worrying about my children's future. I don't miss feeling worthless. But I'm thankful for it," she admitted, "because it taught me to recognize real love when I found it. It showed me that family isn't just about blood, but about choice. It taught me that I am stronger than I ever thought." Gary spun her around, and when she returned to his arms, Sophia was reaching for them from Maria's arms nearby. "I think someone wants to dance with her parents," Gary said, taking Sophia and placing her between them as they continued to sway. Miguel and Marcus joined them, wrapping their arms around Gary and Nora's legs. Suddenly, they were all dancing together, a joyful mix of arms and laughter. "This is perfect," Nora whispered, looking around at their extended family celebrating with them. "This is just the start," Gary replied, kissing her forehead. "Wait until you see what the next chapter brings." As the evening came to a close and their guests began to leave, Gary pulled Nora aside. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Gary, you've already given me everything." "Not everything," he said, pulling out a set of keys. "These are for the house." "What house?" "The house I bought for us, for our family, with a yard for the kids to play in, a workshop where Miguel can build things, a music room for Marcus to practice in, a nursery for Sophia that gets morning sunlight." Nora stared at the keys. "You bought us a house." "I bought us a home," Gary corrected. "Somewhere we can grow old together, where our children can bring their children, where love can grow for generations." "Show me," Nora whispered. The house was everything Gary had promised and more, a large home with gardens and space for kids to run. But what made Nora emotional was the small plaque by the front door, the Welch family home where love multiplies. "Welcome home, Mrs. Welch," Gary said, carrying her over the threshold while Miguel, Marcus, and Sophia followed. "Welcome home, Mr. Welch," she replied, knowing that wherever Gary was, wherever their children were, that would always be home. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 5 years had passed since their vow renewal, and the Welch family home buzzed with the joyful noise of a house filled with love. Miguel and Marcus, now 9 years old, had grown into charming young boys who still called Gary Papa with deep affection. They raced through the halls with Sophia, who at 5 was determined to keep up with her big brothers despite being half their size. The sound of laughter mixed with the clatter of breakfast preparations as Nora tried to get everyone ready for the day. "Miguel, your backpack," she called, flipping pancakes while also trying to tame Sophia's wild curls. "Marcus, did you finish your math homework?" "Yes, Mommy," Marcus called back, already dressed in his school uniform and looking a lot like Gary when he concentrated. "And yes, I have my science project," Miguel added, coming into the kitchen with a carefully made volcano that he and Gary had worked on the night before. Gary came out from his study, looking smart in his suit, but his hair was a bit messy from Sophia's help. "Crisis at the foundation?" Nora asked, noticing the early morning phone call he just finished. "The good kind," Gary said, stealing a quick kiss and a piece of bacon. "The Seattle Times wants to feature our 5-year impact. Apparently, we've helped over 1,000 women now." Nora paused, the weight of that number hitting her. 1,000 women, 1,000 families changed. 1,000 lives filled with hope because of something that had started with her own struggle in the rain. 1,000, she repeated softly. 1,000, Gary confirmed, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "All because my brave wife decided that surviving wasn't enough. She wanted to help others thrive." Their morning was interrupted by the doorbell, and Gary frowned. "Expecting anyone?" Nora asked. "The journalist isn't supposed to come until this afternoon," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Gary went to answer the door, and Nora heard his sharp intake of breath. Moments later, he returned to the kitchen with a young woman who looked no more than 22, holding a baby around 6 months old. She looked thin, tired, and had the haunted look Nora remembered all too well. "Mrs. Welch," the young woman said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I couldn't wait for an appointment. I'm Emma Rodriguez, and I need help." Nora's heart tightened with recognition, not of the girl, but of the situation. This was her 8 years ago, alone and desperate with a child relying on her. "Of course," Nora said immediately, guiding Emma to the kitchen table. "Please sit down. Have you eaten? When did you last have a proper meal?" "I think yesterday," Emma said, her voice small. Gary was already moving, preparing a plate of pancakes and pouring orange juice, while Miguel and Marcus watched with the understanding of children who had been taught that helping others was simply what their family did. "Tell me what's happening," Nora said gently, sitting across from Emma, while Sophia climbed into her lap, sensing that quiet was needed. "My boyfriend kicked me out 3 days ago," Emma said, her voice shaky. "He said the baby was ruining his life, that he never wanted to be tied down. I've been sleeping in my car, but it broke down yesterday, and I spent my last $20 on formula." The story was painfully familiar. Nora felt Gary's hand on her shoulder, offering silent support as memories of her own darkest days hovered near. "What about family?" Nora asked. "My parents cut me off when I got pregnant," Emma said, tears starting to fall. "They called me a disgrace to the family name. I have nowhere to turn, and Isabella—" She looked down at her daughter with such strong love that Nora's heart ached. "She deserves better than sleeping in a car." "Yes, she does," Nora said firmly. "And so do you." Gary stepped forward. "Emma, I'm Gary Welch. My wife and I run the Sarah and Gabriel Foundation. Have you heard of it?" Emma's eyes widened. "I thought I came here because someone at the shelter said you might help, but I never expected wed meat like this." Nora smiled. "We've never forgotten where we came from. 8 years ago, I was in a tough spot, alone with 2 babies and no hope, but you're in a better place now." Emma glanced around the lovely kitchen, looking confused. "But you have all this?" "I do," Nora replied. "But 8 years ago, I was outside a pharmacy, struggling to get by. Gary found me, though we can't really say who found whom." Gary squeezed Nora's shoulder. "What my wife is trying to say is that we understand what you're going through, and we're here to help. I can't repay you," Emma said quickly. "I have no money and no job." "Stop," Nora interrupted gently. "The foundation isn't about that. It's about giving support. Someone helped me when I needed it, and now we help others." At that moment, Miguel spoke up. "Are you going to live with us?" he asked Emma with his 9-year-old honesty. "Miguel," Gary said gently, but Emma was already shaking her head. "Oh no, I couldn't impose." "Actually," Nora said, an idea forming. "Why not? We have a guest house that has been empty since Maria's daughter moved out. It has a kitchen and a nursery, everything you and Isabella need." "Nora," Gary said quietly, "are you sure?" "I'm sure," Nora said, looking at her husband. "Remember what you told me that first night? That sometimes life brings people together when they need it most?" Gary's expression softened with understanding. "I remember," he said. "Emma," Nora continued, turning back to the young woman, "I want to offer you more than just a place to stay. I want you to have a chance to rebuild your life with dignity. We can offer you a job at the foundation, helping other women like you. A safe place for Isabella to grow up and support from a family who understands." Emma stared at her, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because you're not a stranger," Nora replied simply. "You're where I was 8 years ago. If someone hadn't helped me, none of this would be here." Sophia, who had been paying careful attention, reached toward Emma's baby. "Baby," she said seriously. "Her name is Isabella," Emma said, shifting the baby for Sophia to see better. "Bella," Sophia pronounced carefully. Then she looked at Nora. "If Emma wants to stay, then yes, Bella can stay." "I want to stay," Emma whispered. "But I don't understand how this is real. It doesn't happen in real life." "It does in our life," Gary said, sitting down at the table. 8 years ago, my wife and I found each other on one of the worst nights. We were both lost, but together we created something beautiful. We've helped over 1,000 women," Marcus added proudly. "Papa told us today. You could be the 1,000th, Miguel said with the confidence of a child who believes there are always solutions. Emma looked around the table at the family who had welcomed her without question. They spoke of miracles as if they were normal, seeing her worth when she couldn't see past her struggles. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, thank you. Yes." The rest of the morning was busy. Gary called the foundation to arrange temporary care for Isabella. Nora gathered things for the guest house, and Miguel and Marcus became Emma's personal tour guides. They settled Emma and Isabella into the charming guest house with a lovely view and everything a small family would need. Nora stood in the doorway, watching Emma put Isabella down for a nap. "It's going to be okay," she said softly. "How can you be so sure?" Emma asked. "Because I was you," Nora replied. "And look how my story turned out." That afternoon, a journalist from the Seattle Times arrived to interview them about the foundation's impact. She was especially interested in their personal story. "So, you met when you were struggling?" the journalist asked Nora. "I was in a rough place. Gary was grieving. We were both lost, but we found each other at just the right time," Nora explained. "And now you've helped over 1,000 women." "We've supported over 1,000 women helping themselves," Gary corrected. "We just provide the resources and encouragement. They do the real work." The journalist nodded. "I understand you have a new resident?" Nora glanced at Gary, and he nodded. They had agreed to share Emma's story with her permission. "Emma Rodriguez and her daughter Isabella," Nora confirmed. "Emma will join our staff, helping other women facing the same challenges." "Isn't it unusual to hire someone currently receiving your services?" the journalist asked. "Not really," Gary replied. "Some of our best counselors are women who have gone through our program. They understand the challenges in a way no classroom can teach." "It's like the story coming full circle," the journalist observed. "Exactly," Nora said, thinking about Emma and Isabella, about all the women who would benefit from Emma's journey. That evening, as the Welch family gathered for dinner, now including Emma and Isabella, Nora looked around and marveled at how their family had grown, not just in size, but in purpose. "Emma," Sophia said seriously, "tomorrow you can help us feed the ducks." "And I'll show you where the best climbing trees are," Miguel added. "And Marcus can play piano for Bella," Nora suggested. "She seems to like music." "I'd like that," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of it." Later, after the children were in bed and Emma was settled in, Gary and Nora sat on their porch, watching the lights twinkle in the cottage where their new family member was starting fresh. 8 years ago," Gary said softly, "did you ever imagine this?" "Never," Nora admitted. "I thought my story was over. I thought I'd lost everything important, and now I see it was just the beginning." "Every ending is a new beginning in disguise," Gary said, pulling her close. "I love you, Nora Welch," he said, pressing a soft kiss to her head. "I love you too, Gary Welch," she replied. "And I love this life we've built together." In the guest house, a light burned late into the night as Emma held her daughter and whispered hopes for a brighter future. These were the same hopes that Nora had once shared with Miguel and Marcus, hopes that had blossomed into beautiful realities through love, hard work, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance at happiness. Chapter 10. Forever is just the beginning. 10 years after that life-changing night in the rain, Gary Welch stood in his backyard, watching his wife teach their 7 children how to dance to Spanish music in the garden. The Seattle sunlight filtered through the oak trees they had planted together, casting a warm glow over a scene that took his breath away. Miguel and Marcus, now 14, had grown into tall teenagers who still called Gary Papa with the same affection they had shown as little boys. They danced to the mariachi music with a little awkwardness, making their younger siblings giggle as they tried to follow Nora's graceful steps. Sophia, now 10, danced with the confidence of someone who knew her place in the world. Her dark curls bounced as she spun around, teaching 5-year-old Emma, named after the woman who had become like a daughter to them. The steps were the same ones Abuela had taught Nora years before. David, 8, and the 6-year-old twins, Isabella and Gabrielle, added to their colorful family. Each child had joined them under different circumstances, some through adoption, some through birth, all welcomed through love. Their home had grown to embrace every heart that needed caring. "Papa!" Sophia called out, noticing Gary on the porch. "Come dance with us!" "See, Papa!" little Gabriel shouted, his sweet voice still carrying a little lisp. Mommy says you need practice. Gary laughed and put down his coffee to join the dance party. When he reached for Nora and spun her into his arms, she looked just as beautiful as she had on that first night. Perhaps even more, as her beauty now came from the confidence of a woman who knew she was truly loved. Having fun without me? Gary asked, playfully dipping her as their children cheered. Never, Nora replied, laughing. We were waiting for the guest of honor. Guest of honor? What's that about? Gary asked as Nora's eyes sparkled with a secret she had been keeping. Today marks exactly 10 years, she said. 10 years since you asked me to marry you. And 10 years since you said yes to a stranger, Gary replied, holding her close as their children continued dancing around them. The best yes I ever said, Nora whispered, then raised her voice for everyone to hear. Actually, I have an announcement. The music stopped as 7 eager faces turned toward their parents. Miguel and Marcus exchanged knowing looks. They had learned to spot the signs at 14. What is it, Mommy? Sophia bounced on her toes, excited. Nora smiled at Gary. Papa and I are going to have another baby. A wave of joy erupted immediately. Sophia shrieked with delight. The twins jumped up and down, clapping their hands. David cheered, and even Miguel and Marcus smiled broadly. But it was little Emma's serious question that made Gary's heart swell. Another baby to love? She asked. Another baby to love, Nora confirmed, and Emma nodded as if it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Gary swept Nora off her feet, spinning her around as their children cheered. How long have you known? He asked softly. 3 days, she said. I wanted to wait until today. Our anniversary needed some good news. The best news, Gary replied, setting her down and gently holding her face. Number 8, are we crazy? Completely, Nora laughed. But it's the best kind of crazy. Later that evening, after the younger kids were in bed and Miguel and Marcus were busy with their homework, Gary and Nora sat in the garden with Emma Rodriguez, now Emma Welch, who had been adopted 2 years before, and her daughter Isabella, who was 6 and best friends with Gabriel. I still can't believe this is my life, Emma said, watching Isabella play with building blocks on the porch. 5 years ago, I was sleeping in my car. Now I direct the Foundation's youth program, and I have a master's degree in social work. Isabella has 6 siblings who adore her. 7 siblings soon, Nora smiled. 7? Emma replied, amazed. And you know what's the craziest part? I'm not even surprised anymore. This family just seems to grow with love. Gary took Nora's hand, thinking about how true that was. Their family had indeed expanded through an invisible force that seemed to bring together people needing comfort. Speaking of growing, Emma continued, I have some news too. Remember David's birth mother, Sarah Chen? The one who's been writing to him? Of course, Gary said. He remembered how David had come to them at 3 years old, when his teenage mother needed help, but had kept in touch ever since. She's getting married next month and wants David to be in the wedding. She would also like to meet all of us, the family that raised her son. Wonderful news, Nora replied with genuine happiness. David's been excited about her letters. There is more, Emma added, her voice thick with emotion. She's pregnant, and she and her fiancé want David to be a part of his half-sister's life. They want our entire family to be included in their extended family. Gary felt a tightness in his throat. More family? There's always more family, Nora said softly. Later that night, as they walked through their home checking on everyone before bed, a routine now involving 7 rooms, Gary reflected on the wonderful life they had created. Miguel's room was filled with science fair awards and photos of camping trips. Marcus's space was full of instruments, with his piano visible through the open door. Sophia's room overflowed with art supplies and books, while Emma's was neatly arranged, reflecting her past experiences. David's room displayed a world map with pins marking places he wanted to visit. The twins shared a lively room filled with toys and fairy lights, where Gary told stories each night. 8 children, Gary said as they finally entered their own room. We're going to need a bigger car. We're going to need a bigger everything, Nora laughed. But Gary, can you really say you'd change anything? Gary wrapped her in a warm embrace, his hands on her belly where their 8th child was growing. Nothing. Not a single thing. Even the tough times, the scary moments, they all led us here. Do you ever think about that night in the rain? Nora asked, getting comfortable beside him. What if you had taken a different way home? Every day, Gary admitted. And every day, I'm thankful I took the path that brought me to you. I used to think that night was the worst moment of my life, Nora said softly. I was so scared and felt so lost. I thought my story was ending. And now I know it was the first night of my true life, she said. Everything before this was just a warm-up. Gary turned to her in the soft light coming through the windows. What do you think is next for us? Another baby to love, Nora said right away. Watching Miguel and Marcus graduate from high school, teaching Sophia to drive, even if it makes me nervous. Walking David down the aisle one day. Grandchildren growing up together in this house filled with so much love, and our family will keep growing. Nora said with confidence that Emma is already thinking about expanding the program nationwide. We've shown that love grows. Now we need to share that everywhere. Gary kissed her forehead, then her lips, then her belly, where their newest little one was growing. I love you, Nora Welch, more than I did on the day we got married, more than I did yesterday, but not as much as I will love you tomorrow. That's impossible, Nora said. You can't love me more than you do right now. Just watch me, Gary replied with the confidence of someone who knows love has no limits. Outside their window, Seattle shined in the dark. It was the same city where they found each other in the rain. Inside their home, surrounded by the children love had brought them, dreaming of the future they would create together, everything felt warm, bright, and perfect. In another room, Miguel was on the phone with his girlfriend, quietly sharing his excitement about being a big brother again. Marcus was making a lullaby for the new baby, his fingers gently playing the piano. Sophia was in her art room, painting a picture of their family that needed to include one more person. Emma was reading to little Isabella, telling her how families grow through love, not just biology. David was writing in his journal about his mother's upcoming wedding and how proud he was that his true family would be there. And the twins were already asleep, dreaming sweet dreams that only children in safe, loving homes can have. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and new chances to choose love. But tonight, the Welch family felt whole, or as whole as a family can be when it's built on the idea that there is always room for one more heart that needs care. Gary fell asleep, holding his wife, thinking about the scared, broken man he had been 10 years ago. That man could never have imagined this life, this love, this hopeful journey they were building, one heart at a time. Love had grown beyond his wildest dreams, and the best part was this was just the start.